I'm joined today by our visiting scholar, Dr. Gavin Ortlund. Gavin, it seems to me when intelligent people want to explain reality, they appeal to things like math and logic and science. But my question is, how do we explain all of those things? How do you see math, for example, relating to God?
Yeah, well, this question came up for me when I was reading a book by Thomas Nagel, who's
Atheist philosopher, right?
Exactly right. He's an atheist. He taught at NYU for many years, and he's a brilliant philosopher, written many books. One of his books is called What Does It All Mean? And I remember reading through this book, and it's sort of an introduction to philosophy, and he's making the argument that consciousness can't be fully accounted for by physical causes.
Wow.
And so at one point in that argument, he talks about how there's two different kinds of things in the world, ideas and physical objects.
Okay.
So he talks about material reality, physical objects like this table, and mental reality, ideas, abstract.
Concepts, abstracts.
Yep, exactly right. And I just remember the thought occurred to me, if you're a naturalist and don't believe in anything beyond nature, the existence of this mental world is kind of curious. I can't say that it's impossible or that its existence proves that there's something beyond nature, but I do feel that it's sort of a surprise. It's sort of a curious feature that a world where there's nothing beyond the natural order, which is constantly in flux and impermanent,
Yeah.
would produce things like mathematical truths. And so a thought experiment that I sometimes like to think about with this and talk to other people about is, suppose that the entire universe were to implode and no longer be here. Would it still be true that 2 + 3 = 5? And different people give different answers to that. But most of us have an intuition that, yeah, there's something stable about mathematical truths. And we might say a similar thing about the rules of logic, for example.
Yeah.
And so I see that as just a curiosity within naturalism. Whereas within a theistic worldview, for example, I know those aren't the only two possibilities.
Sure.
But as one alternative, you look at that and you say, oh yeah, that's kind of what you'd expect if the world came from an intelligent mind. You'd expect that there would be more stability to the mental world. It's not as surprising to you. And so I don't think math proves God, but I do think it's one of those things that we can access that is very intriguing. And to a naturalist, I suppose you have to sort of raise your eyebrows and say, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that there'd be this such a permanence to these truths that we can access, and their consistency. And I'm not very good at math, so I've taken this
Me neither.
on the testimony of others. But a lot of upper-level mathematicians talk about the elegance and beauty of mathematical formulae. My favorite movie is A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. He talks a lot about the beauty of math. And it's this sense of you're tapping into something that's elegant and harmonious. And I just find that curious from a naturalistic framework.
In the Greek philosophical tradition, you have Plato who talks about these transcendent forms. It seems like a Christian perspective would be that the things like mathematics, numbers, logic, these abstract entities flow from the nature of God. Is that your thinking?
Yeah, I've heard that cashed out in different ways, and I don't know that I've fully resolved that in my own mind. Another way sometimes people have spoken of it is as the ideas of God or the thoughts of God.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to explore that and try to figure out what's the best way to situate that. But if you're a theist, you can do that work. And you can say, okay, there's something back there beyond nature. Whether, however you exactly construe that, as a naturalist, you don't have the option of even trying to look through those different options.
It also seems, Gavin, that human beings have the capacity to kind of follow the intelligibility of the universe. I mean, Einstein would say that the language of the universe is written in mathematics. That makes a lot of sense from a Christian point of view, but from a secular view, it's harder.
Yes, right, exactly, yeah. Well, and it's interesting because today a lot of people have the idea that science and faith are fighting each other,
Yeah.
and there's a warfare model between the two. And one of the things I appreciate about this ministry, Reasons to Believe, is you guys are trying to say, hey, these are God's two books,
Yeah.
general revelation, special revelation. When they're interpreted correctly, we're going to expect harmony between them. And I think the origins of modern science are kind of bear that point out to a
Yeah.
large degree, because a lot of the originators of science, people like Kepler and Newton and others, they approached science with a confidence that was based upon their belief that the world came from a mind, from a rational entity.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. If you think the world is fundamentally chaotic, you will be less apt to look for patterns and consistency and so forth. But if you believe the world is produced by an intelligent mind, that provides a kind of framework for the intelligibility of the world.
Yeah.
And Einstein is very interesting on this as well. And you mentioned Einstein. I mean, he was not a theist per se as I read him. He seemed to believe in Spinoza's God, a kind of impersonal force in some way.
Yeah.
But he had nothing of the science disproves God mentality that you find among some of the more aggressive atheist types. He had so much to say about the sense of wonder and humility before nature, that there's something out there. You know, he talked a lot about when you're penetrating more deeply into the physical universe, it
Right.
always leaves you with the humility of a child, this lingering sense that there's something out there beyond it. And that's how I feel. I feel the more you progress scientifically into the natural world, the more you find suggestions of the supernatural.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just miracles, I mean something beyond nature. And Einstein used a great metaphor. He was interviewed right before his 50th birthday, and he was asked, do you believe in God? And his answer was very thoughtful. He said, I'm not an atheist. And then he said, the question is too big for us. And then he said, we're in the position of a little child who walks into the library, and the child can't read the books, but they have a dim suspicion somebody wrote all these books.
Interesting.
And as a Christian, I really resonate with that. I agree with that metaphor for the vastness of God and our smallness.
Yeah.
And I would just add on and say, as a believer in the gospel, the great glory and beauty that I believe in is the librarian has showed up, and he's helped us out. And he's come to us in the person of Jesus, so that we're not alone in trying to figure out these deep questions. And but I find much to agree with in Einstein's way of putting it.